The carnival arrived one chilly autumn evening, its wheels creaking and groaning as if weighed down by centuries of dark secrets. It unfurled itself on the outskirts of a quiet town, offering promises of merriment and wonder to the small community. But as the colorful tents rose and the Ferris wheel began its slow rotation, a feeling of unease settled like a shroud over the landscape. Central to the carnival's spectacle was a large, ornate tent adorned with vibrant images of jesters, acrobats, and painted performers. Yet, amongst the artistic renditions, there was one particular figure that drew the most attention. A clown, grinning maniacally, his eyes wide and wild, with an uncanny resemblance to a grotesque mask. Unlike the other images that spoke of joy and laughter, this one seemed out of place, as if someone had embedded a haunting portrait amidst the jubilant scenes. Within the tent, the clown from the picture came to life. Donned in a tattered suit of black and white, with smeared red paint around a mouth that stretched a bit too wide, he introduced himself as Giggles. His performances were a mix of slapstick comedy and horrifyingly dexterous tricks. While children laughed at his exaggerated falls and clumsy juggling, adults felt a shiver creep up their spines each time he locked eyes with them. Those crimson eyes seemed to hold tales of bygone horrors and maniacal glee. By day, Giggles was the star of the show. He had an uncanny knack for selecting audience members for his acts, always choosing those who were visibly disturbed by his presence. He would make them part of his act, dancing around them, and whispering things in their ears that no one else could hear. By the end of each performance, the chosen would often look pale and shaken, eager to leave the tent and the carnival itself. But it was during the night that the true terror began. Local pets began to disappear. First, it was a couple of stray cats. Then, a beloved dog from Mrs. Anderson's house. People began to talk, pointing fingers and casting suspicious glances. It didn't take long for rumors to spread that the carnival was cursed, and whispers of Giggles' nocturnal escapades began to circulate. A group of brave young men decided to investigate. They planned to sneak into the carnival grounds after hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the disturbances. Armed with torches and a sense of righteous indignation, they set out one fateful night. As they stealthily moved between the tents, the world seemed to blur and distort. Shadows seemed longer, and the distant laughter of children echoed, though no one was there. The Ferris wheel, though stationary, emitted a soft, eerie glow, casting long and haunting shadows on the ground below. Suddenly, a soft tune began to play, drawing them towards the clown's tent. The music was from a calliope, playing a melancholy rendition of a once familiar carnival song. Pushing aside the tent flap, they stepped inside. The tent was larger than it appeared from the outside. Rows upon rows of empty seats stared back at them, and at the center of the stage stood Giggles. His face was now devoid of any makeup, revealing scarred and grotesque features. He was surrounded by cages, and inside each one was an animal, looking malnourished and terrified. Before they could react, the tent's entrance closed behind them, plunging the interior into near total darkness. The only light came from the stage, where Giggles began to perform. He danced and pranced, pulling animals from the cages and doing unspeakable things to them, all the while singing a deranged version of a lullaby. The young men were paralyzed, unable to move or scream. As dawn approached, the horrifying spectacle came to an end. Giggles, looking satisfied, bowed to his captive audience and, with a flourish, disappeared into the shadows of the tent. The young men, released from whatever spell had bound them, fled the tent, their minds scarred from the horrors they had witnessed. The carnival, they vowed, needed to be stopped. But as the sun rose, casting its golden hues over the town, the carnival was gone. All that remained was an empty field and the memories of a nightmarish clown that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The carnival's abrupt departure was the talk of the town. Overnight, it had vanished, leaving behind only trampled grass and fearful memories. The group of young men who had ventured into the carnival's depths became local heroes, albeit deeply traumatized ones. Their stories of Giggles and the grotesque acts they had witnessed were recounted in hushed tones in every home and pub. However, it wasn't long before reports of a similar carnival sprouting in neighboring towns started pouring in. Each story shared a chilling similarity: missing pets, terrified visitors, and a clown with a maniacal grin. One of the young men, named Thomas, felt a personal vendetta against Giggles. The dog that had vanished from Mrs. Anderson's house had belonged to his late sister, and its disappearance had reignited the pain of her loss. Determined to put an end to the carnival's reign of terror, Thomas rallied a group of like-minded individuals from neighboring towns, forming a brigade of vigilantes. Their sole mission was to track the carnival and put an end to Giggles' malevolent acts. Using stories and sightings of the carnival, the group began piecing together its pattern of movement. It seemed the carnival moved in a spiral, drawing closer and closer to a particular point in the region. Theories abounded, but one stood out. The center of the spiral was a long-abandoned village known for its own dark history of witch trials and mysterious disappearances. The village was called Hollow's End. With a determined heart, the group set out for Hollow's End. The journey was arduous, as the village was nestled deep within a thick, almost impenetrable forest. Stories said the trees in this forest whispered secrets and that anyone who ventured too deep would be lost forever, but Thomas and his brigade were undeterred. Upon reaching the village's outskirts, the sight that met their eyes was eerie. Time seemed to have stood still in Hollow's End. Ancient buildings with crumbling facades lay shrouded in mist, and a palpable sense of dread permeated the air. In the village center stood an old, gnarled tree. Legend had it that accused witches were hung from its branches, their spirits trapped within its bark. As the group approached, they noticed colorful tents starting to sprout from the ground, the Ferris wheel creaking to life, and distant laughter echoing through the mist. The carnival was materializing right before their eyes. Deciding to strike at night, the brigade set up a camp. As nightfall approached, the carnival came to life in full swing. Lights danced, music played, and amongst it all was the haunting figure of Giggles, enticing villagers with his devilish performances. With torches lit and weapons at the ready, the brigade launched their assault. But the carnival was prepared. Otherworldly creatures, disguised as performers, sprung to its defense. A harrowing battle ensued, with fire and shadows clashing amidst the screams of man and beast. Amidst the chaos, Thomas spotted Giggles and gave chase. Through a maze of mirrors and illusions, he pursued the clown, each reflection revealing a different facet of the malevolent jester. Giggles' laughter echoed, disorienting and maddening, but Thomas pressed on. Finally, in a clearing overshadowed by the hanging tree, Thomas cornered Giggles. The clown, no longer laughing, stared at him with those hauntingly familiar eyes. It was then that Thomas realized the truth. Those eyes, filled with pain and rage, mirrored the very darkness that festered within his own soul. Giggles was not just a monster, he was a manifestation of the town's collective sins and fears. Their confrontation was intense and harrowing. Just as dawn began to break, the two adversaries locked in a final, desperate struggle. The outcome of their duel and the fate of the carnival hung in the balance. As the first rays of dawn pierced the dark horizon, Thomas and Giggles, locked in their fateful confrontation, cast long, intertwined shadows on the ground of Hollow's End. The weight of the town's past sins and the haunting legacy of the hanging tree seemed to converge upon them, making the very air heavy with anticipation. Giggles, with his mirthless grin, lunged at Thomas, attempting to drag him into the shadows from which he'd emerged. But Thomas, fueled by his determination to end the cycle of terror, fought back with all his might. They danced a deadly dance, each trying to overpower the other, their movements mirroring the internal battle between darkness and light. Amidst their struggle, the old hanging tree began to shudder and groan. Its branches, which legend said held trapped souls, started to glow with a soft, ethereal light. One by one, spectral figures began to emerge, the spirits of those who had been wronged and met their tragic end upon the tree's cursed boughs. Drawn to the fight, these spirits surrounded Giggles, their mournful wails filling the air. They seemed to recognize in him the embodiment of the hatred and fear that had once consumed the village. With a collective force, they reached out, pulling Giggles toward the tree, attempting to absorb him into its ancient bark and put an end to the carnival's reign of terror once and for all. But Thomas, witnessing this, had an epiphany. Realizing that true redemption couldn't come from merely trapping or destroying Giggles, he shouted, "Release him! And release yourselves! It's time to let go of the past and find peace." Heeding his call, the spirits hesitated. One by one, they began to release their grip, not just on Giggles but on their own lingering resentments. As they did, a transformative light engulfed them, and the air became thick with a sense of peace and release. Giggles, no longer the menacing figure but a sad, broken jester, fell to the ground. Thomas approached him, and for a moment, the two adversaries locked eyes, finding in each other a mutual understanding. With the spirits freed and the weight of the past sins lifted, the carnival began to dissolve. The tents faded, the Ferris wheels creaking halted, and the once menacing laughter was replaced by the harmonious chirping of birds. Giggles, now a mere shadow of his former self, slowly stood up. Without a word, he began to walk away from Hollow's End, disappearing into the thick forest from whence he came. Thomas, along with the brigade, returned to their respective towns as heroes. But more than the accolades, They brought back a lesson about confronting the past and the importance of forgiveness. Hollow's End, no longer haunted by its dark history, began to flourish once more. Children played under the once dreaded hanging tree, which now stood as a symbol of hope and renewal. And so, the tale of the killer clown of the carnival came to an end, not with vengeance but with understanding and redemption. The legend would be told for generations, a reminder of the power of confronting one's darkest fears and finding light amidst the shadows.